May 31st, 1940. 03:42 a.m., the Bassée Canal, just southwest of Lille. Moonlight slides across the water in thin silver bands, barely bright enough to reveal the shattered locks and the burned-out lorries along the embankment. The night smells of cordite and wet mud. Somewhere in the dark, a Vickers gun chatters for a half-second, then stops. Lieutenant Colonel James Briggs crouches beside the canal towpath, fingers pressed against the icy steel of a Bailey girder. His men, barely a company's worth, are spread in a broken arc behind him, dug into shallow scrapes, rubble piles in the ruins of 2 canal-side houses. Most haven't slept in 30 hours. Some haven't eaten in 2 days. But none of that matters now, because Briggs has just received the message everyone feared. Dunkirk evacuation, entering final phase. Hold your position. No withdrawal authorized. Hold? Here? With this? It's practically a death sentence. The distant thrum of engines grows louder, half-tracks, maybe even panzers, rolling toward them from the west. German spotlights sweep lazily across the far bank, searching for shapes, movement, anything to kill. You can almost feel the vibration in the ground each time a heavy vehicle shifts gears. Briggs adjusts the strap of his Webley holster and exhales a thin cloud into the cold air. His adjutant whispers, "Sir, they'll expect us to fall back the moment they hit us." Briggs doesn't reply at first. He simply watches the fog drift above the canal, as if studying the thin line that separates the living from the doomed. Finally, he mutters, "Then we won't give them what they expect." His plan, devised in minutes, executed on fumes, is simple and suicidal. A tiny rearguard force will hold this crossing for as long as humanly possible to buy the final boats at Dunkirk a few more hours, maybe enough to save 40,000 men still trapped on the beaches. It's madness, and every man here knows it. But as the first German shells begin to whistle overhead, throwing fountains of water skyward, Briggs stands up from the embankment. He doesn't shout, he doesn't gesture. He simply says, quietly, "Steady, lads, the next hour decides everything." And then the canal erupts in fire. But Briggs hasn't told his men the part that keeps him awake. He isn't expecting to survive the next hour at all. The barrage stops as suddenly as it began, silence crashing down like a lid slammed shut. Dirt drifts from the rafters of the ruined houses. Men tighten their grips on Enfields. Somewhere behind the line, someone whispers a prayer. Then, from the far bank, the Germans come. Gray figures pour out from the tree line in disciplined waves, moving low and fast along the canal edge. MG-34s spit white sparks as they leapfrog forward, stitching lines of fire across the British positions. The air fills with the metallic snap of rounds smacking brick and the hiss of ricochets slicing through reeds. Briggs steps between 2 Bren gunners. Wait, wait, now! The canal flashes with muzzle flares as the British line erupts. A Bren gun roars, walking a stream of fire across the lead German squad, cutting it in half. Enfield rifles crack in precise rhythms. 5 rounds, pause, 5 more. A boy's AT rifle thunders from a rooftop, the recoil nearly knocking the shooter off his feet. For a moment, the attack falters. You can almost taste the smoke drifting across the water, sharp and oily on the back of your tongue. The Germans regroup, shouting to one another over the chaos. A whistle blows. Another wave sprints forward, this one under the cover of mortar fire. The first shells land behind the British line, showering the men with brick shards. Briggs ducks into a doorway as a blast tears open the canal side road, flipping a motorbike like a toy. His ears ring, but he forces himself upright. He looks down the line. A dozen of his madmen are already down. The rest refuse to fall back. "Shift right," Briggs orders. "Keep them off that footbridge." Despite the losses, the tiny rear guard holds the crossing, minute after minute, volley after volley.
But Briggs notices something he didn't expect. German units aren't pressing as hard as they could. They're feeling the line out, testing it, probing for weakness. They think the British defense is larger than it is. It's a mistake that's buying precious time, but it won't last. Because through the drifting smoke, Briggs spots something that makes his stomach tighten. The silhouette of a Panzer III rolling toward the bank, turret turning slowly toward the canal. The Germans have realized the truth, and now they're bringing the armor.
The Panzer's engine growls like a living thing, deep, predatory, confident. Its treads grind into the canal embankment, pushing aside debris as the turret slews toward the British right flank. You can feel the vibration through the ground even before it fires. Briggs doesn't wait for the blast. "AT team, with me! Move!" he shouts, sprinting across open ground as machine gun rounds snap past his boots. Two men follow, hauling the boy's rifle and a crate of precious tungsten core rounds. They skid behind the skeletal frame of a collapsed shed, breath steaming in the cold morning air. Another blast. The Panzer's shell detonates against a row of sandbags, blasting two men off their feet. The flank is about to break, and Briggs knows it. He leans close to his AT gunner. 40 yards. Angled shot. You only get one. The gunner swallows hard and nods. Briggs risks a glance around the corner, just long enough to see the Panzer lumbering forward, muzzle lowering. He feels his pulse in his teeth. The moment the turret shifts away, he hisses, "Now!" The boy's rifle kicks like a mule, the report echoing across the canal. The tungsten round slams into the Panzer's side armor with a sharp metallic crack, then another crack deeper inside. A plume of smoke bursts from the engine deck. The tank shudders, stalling mid-turn. Disabled, but not dead. A hatch clangs open. German crewmen spill out, firing pistols as they dive for cover. The British line cheers, but only for a second, because something else is happening across the canal. German infantry are massing again, this time in force, and this time with pontoons. Briggs wipes dust from his face, breathing hard. He knows what the pontoons mean. The next crossing attempt won't be a probe. It will be the full, coordinated assault the Germans should have launched hours ago. His adjutant rushes to him. "Sir, message from Dunkirk. They're still pulling men off the beaches, but it's slowing. We're down to the last few thousand." Briggs closes his eyes. Every extra minute they hold is life for someone across the channel. Every delay is another man stepping onto a boat instead of dying on the sand. He turns to his men, exhausted, bleeding, half deaf from hours of shell fire. "Fix bayonets! Shift ammo left! They're coming again, and this time they won't stop!" A distant horn blows. The canal goes quiet again. An awful, suffocating quiet. Then, from the smoke, the German pontoons begin to sliding into the water. The pontoons hit the water with hollow splashes, dozens of them, spreading across the canal like dark beetles under the rising sun. German engineers paddle furiously, shields strapped to their chests, MG teams crouched low in the boats. Behind them, officers shout orders over the roar of mortar fire. Briggs watches from a shattered doorway, the air thick with drifting smoke and the sour stench of burning fuel. His men brace behind rubble walls, knuckles white around rifle stocks. Their ammunition is nearly gone. Their water is gone. Their strength is slipping. But not their resolve. A German flare arcs into the sky and bursts into white brilliance, turning the canal into a stage of stark shadows and blinding light. In that moment, every man sees just how bad it is. An entire company coming straight at them. Maybe more. Briggs steps forward and raises his voice over the rising thunder. "Wait for my mark! Make every round count!" The first pontoon reaches mid-channel. Another follows, then another. German MGs open up from the far bank, pinning the British behind broken masonry. Bullets whip the air, kicking up marble-sized geysers from the canal surface. A Bren gunner tries to rise for a shot and immediately takes a round to the helmet. He drops, the metal ringing like a church bell, dazed but alive. "Hold, hold," Briggs mutters as he watches the pontoons creep closer. He knows what happens if the Germans establish even a single foothold on the British bank. The line collapses, the road behind them becomes a killing ground, and the escape corridor to Dunkirk closes forever. The first German boat reaches within 20 yards. Briggs raises his arm. "Fire!" The British line ignites. Bren guns scream, tearing through the front pontoons. Enfields crack in brutal volleys, each shot placed with cold precision. A pontoon tips, spilling men into the canal. Another is shredded by a burst from the last working Vickers gun, the water turning dark beneath it. But more keep coming. German troops leap from half-destroyed boats, swimming, wading, clawing their way toward the mudflats. The air becomes a storm of shouts, splashes, screams, metal on water, metal on stone. One German sergeant reaches the embankment and hauls himself up. And Briggs is there first, charging down the slope with his Webley drawn. One shot, point blank. The sergeant falls back into the canal with a splash. The line ripples, but doesn't buckle. Yet for all their ferocity, the British defenders are burning through what little ammunition they have left. A Bren gun jams. 2 Bren mags lie empty. A rifleman shouts, "I'm down to 1 clip." Another replies, "Use it well." Briggs wipes blood, not his own, from his sleeve. He looks at the canal again, and his stomach drops. Because despite everything, despite the bodies, the sinking pontoons, the absolute chaos, the Germans are preparing a second wave. Bigger, faster, and this one has air support. The low drone of Stuka sirens begins to slither across the sky. The Stuka sirens hit first, those bone-deep, metallic screams that twist the air into something sharp enough to cut. Briggs feels the sound before he hears it, a pressure in the chest that makes every instinct yell run. His men freeze, staring upward through drifting smoke as the black shapes tilt into their attack dives. "Stuka's down!" someone roars. The ground erupts. Bombs hammer the canal bank, blasting entire trenches into fountains of mud and stone. The shock waves roll through the defensive line like sledgehammers, knocking men off their feet, snuffing out what little cover remains. A direct hit obliterates the last Vickers nest. One moment 3 men are firing, the next there is only pulverized brick and a crater of flame. Briggs drags himself behind a toppled concrete pillar, ears ringing, mouth full of grit. He forces himself up. He has to be seen standing. If the men see him fall, the line falls with him. The Stukas bank away, engines howling, climbing for another run. And then he hears it. Beneath the chaos, beneath the roaring engines and the gunfire, a faint, crackling voice in his field telephone headset. Dunkirk evacuation, approaching completion, final boats departing. They've done it. They've bought the time. Briggs grips the receiver, knuckles trembling. Understood. Holding as long as able. As long as able. He looks around at what able means now. Half his line is gone. The rest are bruised, bleeding, blackened by smoke. Yet every survivor reloads whatever they can. German magazines, loose rounds, anything. A corporal hands Briggs a captured MP-38 with a wry grin. "Figured we might borrow from the neighbors, sir." Briggs almost smiles. Then the second German wave surges forward. This one is brutal. Stormtroopers sprinting low under Stuka cover, machine gunners firing from the hip, grenades arcing across the canal. A German squad close its way onto the embankment, only to be met by a bayonet charge from men who should have collapsed hours ago. You can almost feel the desperation. The raw, animal will to hold just a few minutes more. Briggs fires the MP-38 until the bolt clicks empty, then switches to his Webley. He moves through the smoke like a man carved from it, steadying riflemen, pulling wounded back, calling targets. Every second feels stolen. And then, a sound he never thought he'd hear in this place. Bugles, British bugles, from the rear. Reinforcements? No. Briggs knows the truth. Those aren't fresh troops coming to save them. They're the last unit retreating from positions farther west. The final stragglers, the very men this tiny force was meant to protect. They're clear. All of them. As the last soldiers file past, one major stops long enough to grab Briggs's shoulder. "Colonel, thank God, you held. You bloody well held." Briggs nods once. No grand speech, no victory cry. Just a quiet exhale. Relief mixed with exhaustion so deep it almost folds him in half. He turns back to the canal. The Germans are regrouping again, readying a third push. This one will crush what's left of them. Briggs raises his arm, shouting, "Fall back! Fall back! Disengage!" For the first time all day, his men ran away from the canal instead of towards it. They peeled back through alleyways and crated streets, what remains of a rearguard that wasn't supposed to survive 10 minutes, but held for nearly a day. Behind them, German troops finally storm the empty embankment. Too late to matter. The last perimeter of Dunkirk has done its job. Later, veterans would describe Briggs's stand in one sentence. "We lived because a handful of madmen refused to move." And they were right. Briggs's suicidal plan didn't just save his men. It saved the final 40,000 souls who stepped onto the last boats of Dunkirk. Men who escaped because, for one impossible day, a tiny force along the La Basse Canal held the line no one else could.